on the hunt for sumac. Lead the way, Chester. Let's go find some sumac. And I'm sure we're gonna find it along this country road. Oh, here's some sumac. That's a little sumac bush. Here we're at, this is where the sumac is. And it's very tropical looking. There's the sumac fruit or flower. And this is what we're going to pick. This is what we're going to pick, and these little berries is what we're going to dry to make our sumac powder. Oh, look at this. This is a very mature sumac tree, and look at the size of these beautiful blooms, or they're the sumac buds that I'm going to use to make my sumac powder. Howdy doody, my name is Susie, and today I thought I would share with you how to make sumac powder. This powder is used as a spice. It has a sour, lemony-like flavor. It's tangy. So what you're going to need for this recipe, we're going to need some freshly picked sumac. We're going to need a big pan to dry these in the oven, a food processor, a sieve, and a bowl, and then we're going to need a jar to store it. The indigenous people of North America actually used the sumac to make a sumac aid, kind of like another version of lemonade, because they are sour. The sumac plant grows here wild in Ontario. As you can see, it's growing along a lot of country roads. So you're going to find sumac. This is the Staghorn Sumac, and you're going to find this growing along country roadsides, areas where it has full sun and is very dry. Sumac, there's a couple of things that you want to consider, and I've tried this a couple of times. It didn't work out the first few times. There just wasn't enough flavor, and the reason for that is I went picking after a rainfall. So you want to pick your sumac late August when they're fully ripe at the end of summer. You also want to pick your sumac after you've had a number of days of dry weather. And the reason you want to pick this after a few days of dry weather is that if it rains, the rain washes off a lot of the sour flavor, which is what we're going after. The sourness is actually in the little hairs, or this little velvet-like exterior of the seed, and that's what we're going for. Now, I was under the impression that sumac was poisonous, and there actually is a poisonous variety, but it's very easily to distinguish between the poison and the edible sumac. The poisonous sumac has white berries which hang from the plant, and the leaves are different. So I picked the sumacs that looked the cleanest and the freshest. I brushed off a little bit of the debris, and I just quickly rinsed them under water before I dried them. And that is really key. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a whole bunch of sumac that does not taste lemony or tangy. I collected all my sumac, I cut it down close to the bark, and I dried it in an oven at 170 degrees. Now, I looked at a lot of different references to find out how to do this. And most people were using a dehydrator, or they were using a very low setting on their oven, around 140 to 150 degrees. Unfortunately, my oven shuts off if I leave the door open, so I dried them at 170 degrees, and I actually dried them for about 13 hours. So what you want to do is a slow, consistent dry in your oven. If you can lower it, that's better, and let it dry overnight. And what you're going to be looking for is something that is dry and it cracks. So I let it dry overnight, and let me get that to show you what it looks like. So here I've got the sumac, and you can see it's a beautiful deep red color. When you're picking your sumac, a way to tell whether or not it's ripe is simply to run your fingers along these little velvety berries and taste it. And it is sour, and that's how you know that you've got a good sumac to pick. So like I said, I've let all these sumac dry in the oven overnight. My oven's at 170 degrees. And then the next thing you're going to do is, this is more of an average size. This was a Gigundo sumac drupe that I found that I wanted to try and dry. It worked out just as well. But here's our little sumac. And all we're gonna do, the little berries, they drop off quite easily. So we're just going to break all the little berries off the stem. And we're going to put this through the food processor. Now I watched many different methods on how to do this, but the one that looked the easiest was from Indigenous Food Fridays. And this is how she processed her sumac. So she says to remove all the berries, as many of the berries as you can. And then you want to save the little branches and just put them in a vessel like this. And all the little branches we're going to use to make that sumac aid. So you can see it breaks off very easily. It takes a little bit of time. So if you're wondering how to use the sumac powder, you would use it in any dish or in place of anything that you would actually be using lemon. So that's just an easy rule of thumb. I love the flavor of that, a little bit of sour in certain dishes, especially if they're dishes that are a little bit fatty. I do like the sourness of the sumac without the actual citric acid like lemon. So if you like drinking lemonade but it's too acidic for you, then sumac aid is a great alternative. They're dry and you can hear them crack, but they are not 100%, but they still feel a little bit, there's still a little bit of moisture to them. So some of the more notable properties is for the sumac are for its antioxidant properties. So whenever you're foraging for plants in the wild, etc., sure that what you're foraging for in your area is edible. So always double check to make sure that what you're picking is safe to eat before trying it out. You're using cold water infused into the branches and you just let it sit for a number of hours. I believe the chef that had made it with the fresh peach and some blueberries and 4 handfuls of fresh sumac, let it sit in the sun for 4 hours and then added some honey and had this sumac aid. And because it's so high in tannins, tannins are actually give it a bitter flavor. So if you were to boil the sumac in hot water, then what it would do is not only extract the beautiful sour flavor from the berries, but it was also going to infuse those tannins from the seeds and the branches, which will turn your sumac aid bitter, and you don't want that. So you do not boil or heat on high or add any kind of exceptionally hot water to the berries. unless you are using the already finished process sumac powder, which is just going to be the husk or the outside skin of the berry. So I have just finished removing all the little berries, and you can see how they look. So there's a lot of those little fuzzy, hairy, you can see my hands, there's a lot of those fuzzy little hairy bits left behind. So now the next step is we're going to put this in the food processor, and we're going to separate those seeds from the outside skin, and then we're going to put it through a sieve. So I've just filled my jar with some warm water, and you can see that already the color is infusing into it. And this is basically just going to replicate using cool water and putting it in the sun for 4 hours. So I'm hoping I'm going to infuse a much tangier flavored drink. We're going to process it, and I'm going to fill up the food processor, and this is how I learned to do it from Indigenous Food Fridays. And we're going to pulse it a couple of times to break that skin away from the seed. So we want the skin. There is the seed, and there is the skin. You can see how many seeds, how they're all separated from the husk, and that's great. So now I'm just going to dump this into my sieve. But I'm just finishing off this batch. Like this wooden spoon actually works really well. I was using my hand, but you can get little splinters from the branches. They're small and sharp. So there you go. There you go, and you're left with all the seeds. Store your sumac powder in a jar. So this is just a small amount. This is our sumac that we've made, and you can see the texture. It's soft. So this is a soft powder. You can see how it's coming off in clumps. It's almost a little bit moist, and that's because of all that fluffiness. And now this is the commercial sumac that I bought, and you can see the powder is dry and very fine, but I suspect that it is this consistency because of the seeds are ground up in it. We've got our commercial sumac, which is very dry, and we've got our homemade sumac, which is dry, but it's soft and a little bit fluffy. So I'm just going to taste the two. So it has a nice little sour flavor. And then we'll just taste. It's definitely more intense and definitely has more of the sour flavor. Anyway, so now let's taste our infused tea. I didn't put any sugar in it because I want to taste the, I want to taste how citrusy or lemony it really does taste. So it's a very light citrusy flavor, and it almost does have, it almost does taste like a bit of a citrusy tea. So it does have that nice citrusy flavor. So if you make your sumac age, you can use the fresh fruit directly in cold water, put it in the sun for 4 hours and let it infuse naturally with the sunlight and the warmth of the days. Or if you want to infuse it very quickly, as I did, this has only been infusing for an hour, then I just use a little bit of warm water, and that just kind of speeds up the process. It's basically replicating, instead of putting it outside in the sun for 4 hours to warm up and infuse, I'm infusing it indoors just by using a little bit of warm water for about an hour or so. So you can use the sumac powder anywhere that you would use lemon. It's a great alternative to salt. It's great to have on salads, in salad dressings, stews. It goes very well with greasy type dishes such as duck, etc., because that sour flavor kind of cuts through the fat. It's delicious on cheese. You can add it to desserts, frostings, cakes, muffins, or you can just use it to make some sumac 8, which I think is delicious. So if you try this and you like it, I hope you share it. If you'd like to see more content, I hope you subscribe. Till next time, keep an eye out for sumac. Enjoy!